Rain lashed against the bulletproof windows of Thaddeus Blackwood's coastal mansion, each drop a tiny hammer striking glass that had cost more than most people's homes. Lightning fractured the sky, illuminating the brooding silhouette of a man who had everything and nothing all at once. Thaddeus swirled aged whiskey in a crystal tumbler, watching storm clouds gather over the churning Pacific. The calendar on his smart home system displayed the date in glowing blue numerals. 5 years to the day since the accident that had stolen his future and locked his heart in a vault of ice and regret. Before we dive into what happened next, drop a comment below and tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The security system chimed, an unusual sound in a home that rarely welcomed visitors. Thaddeus frowned, setting down his drink and tapping the intercom. "Sir," his housekeeper Perla's voice crackled through the speaker. "There are children at the gate." "Children?" Thaddeus's voice rasped from disuse. He hadn't spoken aloud in days. 3 of them. "They look identical, sir. Triplets, I believe. They're drenched to the bone and asking for food." Thaddeus's finger hovered over the button that would instruct Perla to send them away. That's what the charitable foundation bearing his name was for, anonymous giving that required no human interaction, no complications, no reminders of what he'd lost. But something stopped him. Perhaps it was the date, perhaps it was the storm, raging outside, mirroring the one that had claimed Elara 5 years ago. "Bring them to the kitchen," he said finally. "Feed them, then call social services." Thaddeus intended to remain in his study, safely distant from the unexpected visitors, but curiosity pulled him down the spiral staircase toward the kitchen. The sound of young voices, something his empty mansion had never known, drew him forward, like a forgotten melody. He paused in the doorway, observing the scene without announcing himself. 3 children, perhaps 11 years old, sat at his immaculate kitchen island. Despite their different genders, 2 girls and a boy, they shared identical features: sharp cheekbones, unusual amber eyes, and a particular tilt to their chins that spoke of stubborn determination. Their clothes were worn thin, patched in places, and still damp from the storm. Perla had provided them with thick towels and steaming bowls of homemade soup. They ate with the careful precision of children who knew hunger intimately but had been taught manners nonetheless. The boy noticed him first, straightening his spine and gently nudging his sisters. 3 pairs of amber eyes locked onto Thaddeus with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You must be Mr. Blackwood," the boy said, his voice carrying an accent Thaddeus couldn't immediately place, something melodic and old world. "I am," Thaddeus confirmed, stepping into the kitchen. "And you are?" The triplets exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them before the more assertive girl spoke. "I'm Elara," she said, her chin tilting upward slightly. "These are my siblings, Orion and Nova." Unusual names, celestial. Something stirred in Thaddeus's memory, but he pushed it away. "Where are your parents?" he asked, keeping his distance, arms crossed over his chest. Nova, the quieter girl, lowered her eyes. "Our father abandoned us when we were babies." "And your mother?" Thaddeus pressed, noting how the 3 tensed simultaneously. "She's missing," Orion answered, carefully placing his spoon beside his nearly empty bowl. "For 27 days now." The precision of the count wasn't lost on Thaddeus. "Missing? Have you contacted the authorities?" "We can't," Elara replied, a flash of something, fear, crossing her features. "They'll separate us, put us in different homes." "We just need food," Orion added quickly. "We can take care of ourselves." Thaddeus studied them carefully. Their unusual coloring, the strange accent, the celestial names, none of it felt random. And the way they carried themselves, despite their ragged appearance and apparent hunger, suggested an upbringing that hadn't always been desperate. "Where do you live?" he asked. Another silent exchange between the triplets. We had an apartment in Meridian Heights, Nova said softly. But after Mom disappeared, we couldn't pay rent. We've been staying wherever we can. Meridian Heights, the most impoverished district in the city, a stark contrast to Thaddeus's cliffside manor in exclusive Azura Point. And what brought you to my door specifically? Thaddeus asked, suspicion creeping into his tone. His address wasn't public knowledge, and the mansion was miles from any bus route a child might access. Lyra reached into her damp jacket and withdrew a folded photograph protected in plastic. She hesitated, then held it out to him. Our mother told us if anything ever happened to her, we should find you. Thaddeus's heart hammered against his ribs as he took the photograph. His fingers trembled as he unfolded it, revealing an image that sent a jolt of recognition through his body. It showed a woman with copper hair and familiar amber eyes, smiling beside a younger version of himself at a tech conference 5 years ago. Elara, his fiancée, the woman whose death had sent him into isolation. But that was impossible. Elara had no children. She certainly didn't have 11-year-old triplets, and she had died 5 years ago in the accident that haunted his dreams. This is some kind of sick joke, he said, his voice dangerously quiet as he handed the photo back. I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to leave, now. It's not a joke, Orion insisted, standing up. Her name is Selena Nazari. She's our mother. That woman's name was Elara Chen, Thaddeus countered, anger building, and she died 5 years ago. The triplets exchanged another of their silent looks. Then Lyra pulled out a second photograph. This was taken 3 months ago, she said, handing it to him, on our 11th birthday. The photograph showed the same woman, older, with subtle differences in her features, but unmistakably the woman he had loved, surrounded by the 3 children now standing in his kitchen. They were smiling, blowing out candles on a modest cake. A date stamp in the corner confirmed it had been taken recently. Thaddeus felt the room spin. He gripped the edge of the kitchen island to steady himself. That's not possible, he whispered. Mr. Blackwood, Perla interjected gently, perhaps you should sit down. He sank onto a stool, still clutching the photograph. Explain, he demanded, looking at the triplets. Our mother told us that if she ever disappeared, we should wait exactly 4 weeks, Nova said, her voice barely audible. If she didn't return, we were to find Thaddeus Blackwood and show him the photographs. She said you were the only person who could help us, Orion added. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And that our lives would depend on it, Lyra finished. Thaddeus studied their faces, those amber eyes so like Elara's, and felt something crack in the carefully constructed walls around his heart. Either this was an elaborate, cruel hoax, or the woman he had loved had not died in that storm 5 years ago. Either she had survived and built a secret life without him, or something far more complicated was at play. Tell me everything, he said finally, from the beginning. The storm outside intensified as the triplets shared their story. They had grown up moving from place to place, never staying anywhere longer than a few months. Their mother worked remotely as a data analyst, homeschooled them, and trained them in what she called necessary skills: languages, basic self-defense, encryption techniques, and other unusual lessons for children. She always said we needed to be ready, Lyra explained, that people might come for us someday. What people? Thaddeus asked. She never said exactly, Orion answered, just that they worked for something called Helios Foundation. The name sent a chill down Thaddeus's spine. Helios Foundation. was a shadowy research organization that had approached his cybersecurity company years ago, seeking specialized encryption software. He had rejected their offer, uncomfortable with their vague explanations about how the technology would be used. Weeks later, he had discovered attempts to infiltrate his company's servers, originating from IP addresses associated with Helios. 4 weeks ago, Nova continued, Mum came home panicked, said they had found us. She packed emergency bags for each of us and gave us instructions. We were supposed to hide at our backup location, an abandoned caretaker's cottage in Evergreen Park. She said she would lead them away from us, Lyra added, that she would return within days, but she never came back. We waited the full 4 weeks like she told us, Orion said. Used the emergency money for food, but it ran out 3 days ago. And now we're here, Lyra concluded. Thaddeus sat in stunned silence, processing their story. If what they were saying was true, if Elara had somehow survived and was living under a new identity as Celine Nazari, why had she never contacted him? Why let him believe she was dead? And most puzzlingly, how could she have 11-year-old children when he had known her until just 5 years ago? Your birthday, he said suddenly. When exactly were you born? January 18th, 2014, Nova replied. Thaddeus calculated quickly. That would mean Elara had been pregnant when he knew her, but that was impossible. They had been together constantly in the months before her supposed death. There had been no pregnancy, no signs, no indication whatsoever, unless a disturbing thought formed in his mind. Helios Foundation had been rumored to be involved in cutting-edge genetic research that crossed ethical boundaries, research that governments pretended didn't exist. I need to make a call, he said abruptly, standing up. Perla, please show our guests to the guest suites in the East Wing. Make sure they have everything they need. Sir? Perla questioned, clearly confused by his sudden shift. What about social services? Not yet, Thaddeus decided. I need to verify some things first. He retreated to his study, locking the door behind him. With shaking hands, he accessed a secure server he hadn't touched in years, an archive of all his investigations into Helios after they had approached his company. Most of the information had led to dead ends, but there had been whispers, fragments of data suggesting experimental genetic work. The clock on the wall ticked loudly as he dug deeper, bypassing security protocols and following digital breadcrumbs. Hours passed as he hunched over his computer, following connections he had missed years ago. What he discovered made his blood run cold. Project Constellation, a classified genetic engineering program. Test subjects with celestial code names, and a lead scientist whose credentials matched Elara's expertise in biochemistry. A side of her work she had rarely discussed with him. A soft knock interrupted his research. Perla stood at the door, her expression troubled. The children are settled, sir, but there's something you should see. She led him to the guest suite where the triplets were staying. They had fallen asleep, exhausted, on one of the king-sized beds, still in their clothes, huddled together like puppies seeking warmth. Orion's sleeve had rolled up, revealing what appeared to be a birthmark on his wrist. Except it wasn't a birthmark. It was a small symbol, almost like a brand, a stylized sun with 7 rays. The girls have the same mark, Perla whispered. I noticed when I brought them towels for bathing. The Helios logo, named for the Greek sun god, 7 rays for the 7 original board members. Thaddeus's mind raced. Not a birthmark, a brand, a way to identify subjects, property. He returned to his study, his search now more focused. Project Constellation documents referred to accelerated development protocols and genetic memory integration. Terms that seemed like science fiction, but as he read further, painted a horrifying picture of children engineered with specific genetic traits, their growth artificially accelerated. If what he was reading was accurate, The triplets, sleeping in his guest room, might have been created rather than born naturally, possibly using genetic material from both him and Elara without their knowledge or consent. It would explain the impossible timeline, the children's unusual abilities, and why Elara or Celine had gone into hiding. It would also explain why she had directed the children to him if she disappeared. Not just because she trusted him, but because biologically these children were as much his as hers. The realization staggered him. He, who had mourned the future family he would never have with Elara, might suddenly be responsible for 3 children he never knew existed. Children who might have been created in a lab as part of an experiment by a shadowy organization with unknown motives. His security system chimed again, this time an alert from the perimeter sensors. Thaddeus switched to the camera feeds and felt his heart drop. 3 black SUVs had pulled up at his gate, and men in tactical gear were preparing to breach the entrance. Helios had found them. Thaddeus slammed his hand on the security lockdown button. Steel shutters descended over every window and door in the mansion. The alarm system would have automatically alerted his private security team, but they were stationed in the city, at least 20 minutes away. He rushed to the guest suite, throwing open the door. The triplets were already awake, alert in a way no children their age should be. "They're here, aren't they?" Lyra asked, her young face set in grim determination. "Yes," Thaddeus confirmed, surprised at their calm. "But how did you—" "Mom trained us to sense danger," Orion explained. "We've been through drills." It was disturbing. These children had been prepared for this moment their entire lives. "There's a safe room in the basement," Thaddeus said. "We need to go there now." As they hurried through the mansion's corridors, a terrible crash echoed from the entrance hall. The intruders had breached the gate faster than he'd anticipated. "This way," he urged, guiding them down a hidden stairwell behind a bookcase in his library. "Mr. Blackwood," Nova said as they descended, her voice surprisingly steady. "There's something else you need to know. Something about Mom." "Tell me when we're safe," he replied, punching a code into a keypad. A heavy door slid open, revealing a fortified room equipped with surveillance monitors, communications equipment, and supplies to last weeks. Once inside, with the door sealed behind them, Thaddeus activated the monitors. The feed showed black-clad figures methodically searching the mansion, communicating via hand signals rather than radios. "Professional," he muttered. "Military trained." "They're from Helios Special Operations," Lyra said matter-of-factly. "Mom called them sun rays." Thaddeus turned to the children, seeing them in a new light. "How much do you know about what's happening, about who you are?" The triplets exchanged their customary glance before Orion spoke. "We know we were created, not born," he said quietly. "Mom told us last year when we started asking questions about why we didn't have baby pictures before age 2. We know they accelerated our growth for the first few years of our lives," Lyra continued. "That's why Mom could claim we were her biological children, even though the timeline doesn't work. And we know that they used genetic material from you and Mom without permission," Nova finished. "They were creating the perfect operatives. Children who could be trained from creation with enhanced physical and cognitive abilities." Thaddeus felt sick. Children designed to be weapons, and his DNA, his genetic legacy, had been harvested and used without his knowledge. "Your mother," he said carefully. "Elara, or Selene. She was part of this program." "She was a scientist for Helios," Nova confirmed. "But when she discovered what they were really doing with her research, she planned an escape. She was supposed to destroy us before we reached viability, but she couldn't do it. Instead, she faked her death, stole us from the lab, and went into hiding," Orion added. "She's been running ever since." Thaddeus's mind reeled. The accident that had supposedly claimed Elara's life, a car plunging into the ocean during a storm, had been staged. She had chosen freedom for these children over a life with him. "And now they've taken her," Lyra said, her voice breaking. "For the first time. We need to find her before they terminate her." The clinical term in the mouth of an 11-year-old was jarring. These children had never been allowed to be children. On the monitors, the intruders had reached his study, efficiently breaking through the encryption on his computer. They would discover that he had accessed the Helios files. They would know he now understood. "My security team will be here soon," Thaddeus said, checking his watch. "But we can't stay here. They'll bring in equipment to detect the safe room." "There's a tunnel, isn't there?" Lyra asked. "Most mansions like this have escape routes." Thaddeus raised an eyebrow. "How would you know that?" "Mom made us study architectural history," she replied, "especially security features of different eras." Indeed, there was a tunnel, a remnant from Prohibition days, when the original owner of the property had used it to transport illegal alcohol. It led to a boathouse half a mile down the coast. "It hasn't been used in decades," Thaddeus warned. "I'm not even sure it's structurally sound." "It's our best option," Orion said, with the certainty of someone far older than 11. Thaddeus gathered emergency supplies from the safe room: flashlights, water, a first aid kit, and a satellite phone. He also took his personal sidearm from the safe, checking that it was loaded before securing it in a holster at his back. He led the triplets to a concealed door at the back of the safe room, revealing a narrow passageway cut through the coastal rock. The air was damp and smelled of salt and decay. "Stay close," he instructed, switching on his flashlight. "The tunnel follows the coastline. It's about half a mile to the exit." As they made their way through the cramped passage, Thaddeus's mind worked furiously. If what the children had told him was true, and the evidence certainly supported their story, then Elara was alive but in grave danger. These children, created from his and Elara's DNA without their consent, were being hunted by a powerful organization with seemingly unlimited resources. And he, who had spent 5 years in isolated grief, was now their only protection. "What did your mother tell you about me?" he asked, as they navigated the tunnel. "That you were brilliant," Nova replied. "That you had principles." "She said you were the only one who ever turned down Helios," Orion added. "The only one who saw through them." "And that you loved her," Lyra said quietly. "That you would have loved us too if you'd known." Something shifted in Thaddeus's chest, a wall crumbling after standing strong for 5 years. These children were strangers to him, yet undeniably connected. Created in a lab, yes, but still carrying his genetic legacy, still innocent in the machinations that had brought them into being. "She was right," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "about all of it." The tunnel narrowed as they progressed, the ceiling dropping so low that Thaddeus had to hunch over. Water dripped from above, and twice they had to navigate around partial cave-ins. The children moved with surprising agility, adapting to the challenging terrain without complaint. Finally, the passage began to slope upward, and Thaddeus could smell fresh air mixing with the mustiness of the tunnel. A rusty ladder led to a trapdoor above. "Wait here," he instructed, climbing up to push against the trapdoor. It resisted at first, years of disuse having sealed it shut, but finally gave way with a groan of protesting metal. Thaddeus poked his head out cautiously. The trapdoor opened into the floor of an old boathouse, its windows grimy with salt and age. Through the dirty glass, he could see that night had fallen, the storm still raging across the bay. He climbed out, then helped each of the triplets up through the opening. They stood in the abandoned boathouse, the wind howling through cracks in the wooden walls. "We can't stay here," Thaddeus said, peering through a window toward the road. "They'll search all structures on the property." "Where will we go?" Nova asked, hugging herself against the cold. Thaddeus considered their options. His instinct was to contact authorities, but if Helios had the reach and influence their resources suggested, official channels might be compromised. "I have a friend," he said finally. "Someone who owes me a favor and knows how to stay off the grid. But first, we need transportation." In the corner of the boathouse, covered by a tarp, was an old motorboat, functional but unlikely to attract attention. Thaddeus checked the fuel tank, half full, enough to reach the marina on the other side of the bay. "Can any of you operate a boat?" he asked, only half joking. To his surprise, Lyra nodded. "Mom taught us the basics for emergencies." Of course she had. These children had been raised to survive in a world that wanted to use them as weapons. As Thaddeus prepared the boat, he wondered what Elara, Celine, had endured these past 5 years. Running, hiding, protecting these children, while knowing that discovery meant death or worse. All while he had retreated into wealth and isolation, nursing his grief like a precious thing. He helped the triplets into the boat, then pushed it out into the churning waters of the bay. The rain had lessened to a drizzle, but the wind still whipped the water into whitecaps. Once they were away from the dock, Thaddeus started the engine, keeping the throttle low to minimize noise. As they motored across the dark bay, lights from his mansion visible in the distance, Thaddeus made a silent promise to the woman he had loved, the woman who might still be alive. He would protect these children, he would find her, and together they would make Helios pay for what they had done. Nova huddled beside him in the boat, her amber eyes reflecting the distant lights. "Do you think Mom is still alive?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the engine and waves. Thaddeus put his arm around her thin shoulders, surprised at how natural the gesture felt. "If she's anything like I remember, she's not just alive. She's fighting back." The girl nodded, seemingly comforted by his certainty. As they approached the twinkling lights of the marina on the far side of the bay, Thaddeus knew their journey was just beginning. Finding Elara, exposing Helios, ensuring the triplets' safety, it would require resources, cunning, and allies. But for the first time in 5 years, Thaddeus Blackwood had a purpose beyond mere existence. He had a family to protect, a wrong to right, and perhaps a second chance at the future that had been stolen from him. The marina lights glimmered through the drizzle as Thaddeus guided the boat toward a secluded dock at the far end, away from the main buildings. He cut the engine, letting momentum carry them the final stretch to minimize noise. The triplets moved with practiced coordination, securing the boat without being asked. "Stay low," Thaddeus whispered, scanning the empty docks. No sign of pursuit yet, but he didn't expect Helios to give up easily. He helped the children onto the weathered wooden planks, noting how they automatically formed a defensive triangle, each watching a different direction. "There's a boatyard office with a landline," he said, pointing to a small building with dim lights. "We need to make a call, then find transport." They moved swiftly through shadows, avoiding the sparse security cameras. Thaddeus felt an unexpected sense of pride watching how efficiently the children operated, even as he mourned the circumstances that made such skills necessary for 11-year-olds. The office door was locked, but Orion produced a slender metal tool from his pocket and had it open in seconds. "Mom taught us," he explained, noticing Thaddeus's raised eyebrow. "For emergencies only." Inside, the cramped office smelled of engine oil and old coffee. Thaddeus found the landline and dialed a number from memory, praying it was still active. 3 rings. Then a gruff voice answered, "Harbor Auto Salvage." "I need to speak with Razor," Thaddeus said. "Tell him Phoenix is calling." A pause, then, "No one by that name here." "Tell him it's about Elara." Another pause, longer this time, then the sound of the receiver being passed. "This line isn't secure," an accented voice said without preamble. Nothing is, Thaddeus replied. I need help, Reza. Transportation and a safe location for 4. The Marina Diner. 20 minutes. Come alone. The line went dead. Thaddeus turned to the triplets. Change of plans. We need to separate temporarily. Alarm flashed across their faces, and Lyra stepped forward. We stay together. Mom's rules. I understand, Thaddeus said gently, but my contact won't meet us if I bring unknown parties. He doesn't know about you yet. We don't know about him either, Orion countered. How do we know we can trust him? Reza was Elara's friend before he was mine, Thaddeus explained. He helped develop the security systems for my company. If anyone can help us find your mother, it's him. The triplets exchanged one of their silent communications. Finally, Nova spoke. We'll wait, but we need a contingency plan. Thaddeus nodded, impressed by their tactical thinking. There's a boathouse with rental kayaks 1 dock over. If I'm not back in 30 minutes, or if you spot anyone suspicious, get a kayak and head for the nature preserve across the inlet. Stay hidden until daylight, then make your way to this address. He scribbled on a scrap of paper, an address in neighboring Cyprus Harbor. What's there? Lyra asked. A lawyer, Eleanor Vaughan. Tell her I sent you and show her this. He handed her his watch, a unique timepiece with his company's logo engraved on the back. She'll know it's genuine. Lyra took the watch, slipping it into her pocket. 30 minutes, then we move. Thaddeus left them hidden in the office and made his way to the Marina Diner, a 24-hour establishment catering to fishermen and night workers. At this hour, only 2 booths were occupied, both by solitary men nursing coffees. Reza Farsi sat in the farthest booth, his back to the wall. At 55, he looked older than when Thaddeus had last seen him. His black beard, now streaked with grey, deep lines etched around his eyes. He wore the coveralls of an auto mechanic, grease permanently embedded in his knuckles. 5 years, Reza said as Thaddeus slid into the booth. No calls, no messages. I thought perhaps you had joined our mutual friend in the afterlife. She's alive, Reza? The older man's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. That's impossible. So are 11-year-old children created in 5 years, and yet they're waiting for me at the boatyard office. Reza's eyes narrowed. Explain. Thaddeus did, keeping his voice low, watching Reza's expression shift from disbelief to horror to grim understanding. I suspected Helios was involved in something unethical, Reza said when Thaddeus finished. But this is monstrous. They have Elara, Celine, and they're hunting the children. We need somewhere to regroup, then find out where. They're holding her. Reza drained his coffee and stood. My salvage yard has living quarters below ground, off-grid, shielded from surveillance. We'll go there, but first we get the children. They returned to the boatyard office to find it empty, the door ajar. Thaddeus's heart plummeted. They were right here, he said, searching for signs of struggle. I told them to wait. Shh. Reza held up a hand, listening. A faint tapping came from outside, rhythmic, intentional. They followed the sound to a storage shed beside the office. Inside, hidden beneath a tarp, they found the triplets. We saw men in the parking lot, Lyra explained as they emerged. Black SUVs. Thaddeus checked his watch. We've been gone 15 minutes. How did they find us so quickly? The boat, Orion suggested. They probably have drones searching the coastline. Reza nodded grimly. The boy's right. We need to move. My truck is parked behind the diner. They took a circuitous route through the marina, using the cover of boat sheds and repair buildings. Reza's vehicle was an unmarked tow truck, its bed covered by a tarp concealing the tools of his trade. Under the tarp, he instructed the triplets, there's a hidden compartment in the floor of the truck bed, designed for transporting certain items without scrutiny. You mean smuggling? Nova said matter-of-factly. A ghost of a smile crossed Reza's weathered face. Smart child. The hidden compartment was cramped but secure. Once the triplets were safely concealed, Thaddeus joined Reza in the cab. "You trust these children?" Reza asked as they pulled away from the marina. "They could be programmed, trackers, monitoring devices." "I've considered that," Thaddeus admitted. "But why send them to me with a warning if they're working for Helios? And their fear is genuine." Reza grunted, unconvinced. He drove a complex route through the coastal town, doubling back and changing directions seemingly at random. Finally, they turned down a gravel road lined with junked cars and auto parts, arriving at a salvage yard surrounded by a high chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Reza pressed a remote and heavy gates swung open. The yard was a maze of stacked vehicles, crushing equipment, and metal shipping containers. In the center stood a cinder block building with faded lettering, Harbor Auto Salvage. "Home," Reza said, parking beside the building. Once inside, he locked the door with multiple deadbolts and led them through a cluttered office to a back room. There, he moved aside a heavy metal desk, revealing a trapdoor. "My father built this during the Cold War," he explained, lifting the door. "Paranoid old man. Turns out he wasn't wrong about everything." Steep stairs led to a surprisingly spacious underground bunker. Solar-powered LED lights illuminated a living area with basic furnishings, a kitchenette, bathroom, and several doors leading to additional rooms. The walls were lined with metal panels. "Faraday cage," Reza explained, noting Thaddeus's glance. "Blocks electromagnetic signals. No trackers or bugs can transmit from in here." The triplets emerged from hiding, eyes wide as they took in their surroundings. "There are beds through there," Reza said, pointing to one of the doors. "Food in the pantry. You should eat, then rest. We have work to do in the morning." Orion approached a wall covered in maps and news clippings. "What's all this?" Reza exchanged a glance with Thaddeus. "Research on Helios." "You've been tracking them?" Lyra asked, joining her brother. "For years," Reza confirmed. "After the accident, Elara's supposed death, I became suspicious. Things didn't add up. The body was identified through dental records, but there was no autopsy. The investigation was closed too quickly. When I started asking questions, I received warnings to stop." "But you didn't," Nova said softly. "No, I kept digging quietly. Found connections between Helios and government contracts, offshore accounts, shell companies. They're involved in dozens of research facilities across the globe, all operating under different names." Thaddeus studied the wall, impressed by the thoroughness of Reza's investigation. Red strings connected locations, names, and events, creating a complex web of Helios operations. "Did you know," he asked Reza, "about Elara being alive?" Reza shook his head. "I suspected but had no proof. After the third time someone broke into my home, I moved here permanently and went off-grid. They ate a simple meal of canned soup and crackers, the triplets devouring their portions with the efficiency of children accustomed to uncertain food supplies. Afterward, despite their protests, Thaddeus insisted they get some rest. "You need sleep," he said firmly. "Tomorrow will be challenging enough." Once the children were settled in the small bedroom, Thaddeus and Reza spread out documents on the central table. "These are Helios facilities we've identified," Reza explained, pointing to markers on a map. "Research centers, data storage, administration. If they're holding Selene, it would be in one of their secure locations." "How many are there?" "Too many to search blindly. We need to narrow it down." Thaddeus rubbed his eyes, fatigue setting in after the adrenaline of the day. "The children might know something, details about where they lived before, facilities Selene mentioned." "Perhaps," Reza agreed, "but there's someone else who might help us, if I can reach her." "Who?" "Dr. Moira Devereaux, former Helios researcher. She contacted me about 6 months ago seeking protection, said she had information about unethical practices but needed guarantees before she'd share it. Then she vanished before our arranged meeting. I've been trying to locate her since. You think she knows about Project Constellation? I think she was part of it. Razor pulled out a folder containing a photograph of a stern-looking woman with silver-streaked black hair. Her specialty was accelerated human development. If anyone knows where they'd take Celine, it's her. They worked through the night, analyzing data and following digital breadcrumbs. By dawn, they had compiled a list of 3 potential facilities where Celine might be held. The triplets emerged from the bedroom looking surprisingly refreshed. They joined the men at the table, studying the maps with interest. We need to narrow down these locations, Thaddeus explained. Any information you have about facilities your mother mentioned, places you might have lived or visited, could help. Nova frowned, concentrating. Mum always avoided certain areas when we traveled. Said they were too hot, meaning Helios had strong presence there. Which areas? Razor asked. The southwest, northern Virginia, and a place called Port Jefferson. Razor's eyebrows shot up. Port Jefferson. That's one of our 3 possibilities. There's a research facility there registered to a Helios shell company. What else do you remember about your mother's precautions? Thaddeus asked. The triplets exchanged glances before Elara answered. She was always concerned about medical facilities. We were never allowed to go to hospitals, even when Orion broke his arm last year. She treated it herself. She was afraid they'd discover your unique genetics, Thaddeus surmised, or that Helios had people in healthcare systems. She also avoided certain technology, Orion added. No smartphones, no social media, nothing that could be easily tracked. We used specialized equipment she brought with her when we escaped. Equipment like what? Razor pressed. Encrypted laptops, communication devices with frequency scramblers, and she always carried an emergency kit with fake IDs, cash, and... Orion hesitated. And what? Thaddeus prompted. Vials, Nova finished. Small glass vials with liquid. She injected us with it every month, said it was to suppress certain markers in our blood that could identify us. Razor and Thaddeus exchanged concerned glances. Did she ever explain what was in these injections? Thaddeus asked carefully. She called it a protein inhibitor, Elara explained, something that would mask genetic modifications. She said without it, any standard blood test would flag us in Helios systems. When was your last dose? Razor asked. 26 days ago, the triplets answered in unison. The day before Mom disappeared. Another synchronized behavior that reminded Thaddeus of their unusual origin. These children were biological siblings in the truest sense, created simultaneously, sharing identical genetic modifications. So within days, your blood will show markers that Helios can detect, Thaddeus concluded. That explains their urgency. In finding you, we need to synthesize more of this inhibitor, Razor said, which means we need to find Devereaux. And quickly, he turned to a sophisticated computer setup in the corner, surrounded by signal-blocking equipment that allowed him to access the internet without leaving digital footprints. I have a contact who specializes in finding people who don't want to be found, he explained, typing rapidly. If Devereaux is still alive, Tabitha will locate her. While Razor worked, Thaddeus studied the triplets with new eyes. These children, created from his genetic material without his knowledge, were scientific marvels. But they were also victims, denied a normal childhood, constantly on the run, their bodies modified without consent. And in some inexplicable way, they were his family. Tell me about her, he said softly. Your mother, what was she like? The triplets' expressions softened simultaneously. She's brilliant, Nova said. She can explain complex science so even children can understand it. She's tough, Orion added. She taught us self-defense, survival skills, how to disappear in plain sight. But she's also gentle, Lyra finished. She reads to us every night, no matter how tired she is. She makes up stories about a world where children like us are free. The image they painted matched the Elara he had known. Brilliant, determined, compassionate. But there were new layers to her he'd never seen. The fierce protectiveness of a mother, the resourcefulness of a woman on the run, the moral courage to defy a powerful organization. She spoke about you, Nova said tentatively. On nights when she thought we were asleep, she'd look at your photograph and cry. Something cracked in Thaddeus's chest, a fissure in the wall of ice he'd built around his heart. Did she say why she never contacted me? He asked, his voice rough. She said it was too dangerous, Orion replied, that Helios would monitor anyone connected to her former life, that the only way to keep you safe was to let you believe she was dead. She also said she couldn't burden you with what we were, Lyra added quietly, that it wouldn't be fair to drag you into a life of running and hiding. Thaddeus absorbed this, a mix of emotions churning inside him. Pain at the years lost, understanding of her impossible choice, and a growing determination to reunite this fractured family. I've got something, Reza called from his computer. Tabitha traced Devereaux to a cabin in the mountains, about 4 hours from here. She's living under the name Margaret Walsh, working remotely as a pharmaceutical consultant. Can we trust this information? Thaddeus asked. Tabitha's never been wrong before, and she has no connection to Helios that I've uncovered. A plan began to form. They needed to reach Devereaux, convince her to help them synthesize more inhibitor for the triplets, and extract information about where Selene might be held. We'll need supplies, Thaddeus said, and I need to access funds without alerting Helios to our movements. Reza nodded. I have cash reserves here, but for what we're planning, we'll need more. I might have a solution for that too. He disappeared into another room, returning with a metal lockbox. Inside were passports, credit cards, and identification documents, all bearing Thaddeus's photograph but different names. I prepared these years ago, Reza explained, after I became suspicious about Elara's death. I thought you might need them someday. Thaddeus picked up one of the passports, examining the flawless forgery. You never gave up hope. Hope is stubborn, Reza replied with a shrug, like old mechanics. The next hour was spent in careful preparation. Reza provided clothing for all of them, nondescript items that wouldn't attract attention. He also supplied basic disguise materials, hair dye, glasses, hats, to alter their appearances. The triplets transformed themselves with practiced ease, Nova darkening her hair with temporary dye, Orion donning glasses and a different hairstyle, Lyra applying subtle makeup that made her appear older. They moved with the efficiency of children, who had done this many times before. We can't all go, Thaddeus said as they prepared to leave. It's too risky. You want us to stay here, Lyra surmised, disapproval evident in her tone. It's safer, Thaddeus insisted. Reza and I can approach Devereaux, get the formula for the inhibitor and information about your mother. With respect, Mr. Blackwood, Orion countered. We've been doing this our entire lives. We know how to stay hidden, how to assess threats. And more importantly, we know details about Mom that might be crucial. Plus, Nova added quietly, Devereaux was involved in our creation. She might respond differently to seeing us in person. Thaddeus looked to Reza for support, but the older man shrugged. The children have valid points, he said, and splitting up creates its own risks. If Helios discovers this location while you're gone, the implication hung in the air. Separated, they would be more vulnerable. All right, Thaddeus conceded. But you follow our instructions exactly. No improvisations, no heroics. The triplets nodded solemnly. They left the salvage yard in a different vehicle, an inconspicuous delivery van with the logo of a non-existent plumbing company. Reza drove, taking back roads and avoiding major highways. The triplets sat in the cargo area, surrounded by actual plumbing supplies that served as both camouflage and potential hiding places if needed. Thaddeus rode in the passenger seat, watching the landscape change as they left the coastal region and headed inland toward the mountains. The events of the past 24 hours felt surreal. Discovering Elara was alive, learning about the triplets, becoming a fugitive from a shadowy organization. His life had transformed completely, yet strangely, he felt more alive than he had in 5 years. You care for them already, Reza observed, keeping his eyes on the road. Is it that obvious? You look at them the way a father looks at his children, protective, proud, despite everything. They're extraordinary, Thaddeus said simply. What they've endured, how they've adapted. They're survivors. Like their mother. Reza paused. And like you. You didn't die with Elara 5 years ago, but you stopped living. Perhaps this is your second chance. The mountain roads grew steeper, winding through forests of pine and aspen. According to Tabitha's information, Devereaux's cabin was situated on a private dirt road, approximately 2 miles from the nearest neighbor. They parked the van at a scenic overlook half a mile from their destination and continued on foot, moving through the forest rather than taking the road. The triplets navigated the terrain with surprising agility, barely making a sound as they moved through the underbrush. The cabin came into view, a modest structure with solar panels on the roof and a late-model SUV parked outside. Smoke curled from the chimney, and through a window they could see movement inside. How do we approach? Thaddeus asked, keeping his voice low. Carefully, Reza replied. Devereaux fled Helios. She'll be paranoid, possibly armed. Let us make first contact, Lyra suggested. A woman alone in the woods will be less threatened by children than by men. Thaddeus hesitated. It's too dangerous. Think strategically, Orion countered. If she's former Helios, she knows their tactics. 2 men approaching her cabin. She'll assume the worst. But 3 children asking for help? That's unexpected, Nova added. It gives us the advantage of surprise. Again, Thaddeus was struck by their tactical thinking, a disturbing skill for children so young, yet undeniably useful in their current situation. We'll compromise, he decided. The triplets approached the front, visible and non-threatening. Reza and I will circle to cover the rear exit in case she runs. They agreed on signals, a bird call if the situation turned dangerous, another if it was safe to approach. Then the triplets moved toward the cabin while Thaddeus and Reza circled through the trees. From his position, Thaddeus watched as the children approached the cabin's front door. They moved differently now, their postures relaxed, their expressions open and vulnerable. It was a striking transformation from the alert, wary children he'd come to know. They looked like ordinary kids who might be lost in the woods. Nova knocked on the door. Seconds passed. Then the door opened slightly, held by a security chain. A woman's face appeared, older than in the photograph, her once black hair now completely silver, deep lines etched around her eyes and mouth. Thaddeus couldn't hear the conversation, but he saw Devereaux's expression change from suspicion to shock. The door closed briefly, then reopened fully. The woman stepped onto the porch, her gaze sweeping the surrounding forest. A practiced security check. Then the triplets entered the cabin and the door closed behind them. Thaddeus tensed, fighting the urge to rush forward. Had they walked into a trap? 10 minutes passed, the longest of Thaddeus's life. Then the bird call they'd agreed upon sounded from inside the cabin, the signal that it was safe to approach. Cautiously, Thaddeus and Reza emerged from the trees and approached the cabin. The door opened before they reached it, Lyra standing in the entrance. "She wants to talk to you," she said simply. Inside, the cabin was spartanly furnished but comfortable. Devereaux sat in an armchair, the other triplets seated on a couch across from her. Her weathered face was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a mug of tea. "Moira Devereaux?" Thaddeus asked, though he already knew the answer. She nodded. "And you must be the genetic contributor, Thaddeus Blackwood. I'd recognize those features anywhere. They've manifested strongly in the boy." Her gaze shifted to Reza. "And Reza Farsi, the one who's been looking for me." "We need your help," Thaddeus said, seeing no point in pretense. Clearly, Devereaux's voice was dry, academic. "The inhibitor formula, I presume. The children have told me their mother is missing. You know about the inhibitor? I created it." She set down her mug. "It was meant to be a safeguard, a way to help the subjects live normal lives outside. Controlled environments?" Helios saw it differently, as a threat to their ability to track and control their investments. "Investments," Thaddeus repeated, disgust evident in his tone. "You mean children, human beings?" "Yes." For the first time, emotion cracked through Devereaux's clinical demeanor. Shame. "I didn't understand the full scope of the project. When I joined, by the time I realized what we were doing, I was in too deep to simply walk away." "So you helped create these children," Reza said, his voice hard. "Accelerated their development, treated them as experiments." "And then I helped destroy the project," Devereaux countered. "When Dr. Nazari, Celine, approached me about her concerns, I provided her with access codes, security protocols, and later, the inhibitor formula. I made her escape with the subjects possible." "We have names," Nova interjected, her young voice sharp with suppressed anger. "We're not subjects." Devereaux's expression softened fractionally. "Yes, you do. I apologize." Thaddeus took a seat opposite Devereaux. "We believe Helios has captured Celine. We need to find her, and we need to protect the Lyra, Orion, and Nova. Will you help us?" Devereaux was silent for a long moment, studying each of their faces in turn. Finally, she nodded. "I will. Not because I deserve redemption, I don't, but because these children deserve freedom from what we created." She rose and moved to a bookshelf, removing a false back to reveal a hidden safe. From it, she extracted a flash drive and a small notebook. "The inhibitor formula," she said, holding them out. "And something more valuable, access credentials for Helios's secure network. If Celine is in one of their facilities, there will be records." Thaddeus took the items, hope rising within him for the first time. "Why give us these? Why now, after hiding for so long?" Devereaux's gaze drifted to the triplets. "Because seeing them here, alive, functioning in the world, it proves Celine was right. They aren't weapons or experiments, they're children, and they deserve the chance she fought to give them." She returned to her chair, her posture straightening as if preparing to deliver difficult news. "There's something else you should know," she said. "Something about the children that Celine herself may not fully understand." The triplets tensed simultaneously. "What about us?" Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Devereaux's eyes held, a mixture of scientific fascination and genuine concern. The genetic modifications, they weren't just about enhanced intelligence or physical capabilities. There was another component, one only the highest levels of Helios leadership knew about. She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "You were designed to develop abilities beyond normal human parameters, abilities that would continue to emerge as you matured." "What kind of abilities?" Thaddeus asked, a chill running through him. Enhanced neural synchronization, for one. The reason they move and think in tandem sometimes. But there's more. Potential telepathic capabilities, accelerated healing, sensory perception beyond normal ranges. It's all theoretical, but the early tests were promising. Promising. The clinical term made Thaddeus's stomach turn. These children, his children, had been designed as more than weapons. They were meant to be something beyond human. The triplets didn't seem surprised by this revelation. If anything, they appeared relieved. "We knew we were different," Orion said quietly. "We can feel each other's thoughts sometimes. Know when one of us is in danger. And things heal faster than they should," Nova added. "Mom said it was part of our unique physiology, but she never explained further." "She was protecting you," Devereaux said. "Knowledge of your full capabilities would be dangerous for you and for others. Helios wants to study you, replicate these traits in future subjects. Which is why we need to find Selene and expose Helios," Thaddeus said firmly. "End this once and for all." Devereaux shook her head. "Exposing Helios won't be simple. They have connections in governments worldwide, funding from sources that prefer to remain invisible. They've been preparing for potential exposure for years. Then we don't expose them publicly." "Not yet," Razor suggested. "We focus on extracting Selene and ensuring the children's safety." "Based on the access patterns I've monitored," Devereaux said, "I believe Selene is being held at the Port Jefferson facility. It's one of their most secure locations, with medical capabilities for advanced research." "Can you help us get in?" Thaddeus asked. Devereaux hesitated. "My credentials may still work, but using them would alert Helios immediately. However, there might be another way." She moved to a laptop on a desk in the corner, inserting the flash drive she'd given Thaddeus. "The Port Jefferson facility has a vulnerability, a maintenance access that isn't on the main security grid. It was designed as an emergency exit in case of catastrophic system failure." "How do you know about this?" Razor asked suspiciously. "Because I helped design the facility," Devereaux replied without looking up from the screen. "Before I understood what it would be used for." She pulled up schematics of a sprawling compound disguised as a pharmaceutical research center. "This access point here," she indicated a service tunnel on the southwest corner. "It connects to the climate control system, limited surveillance, minimal personnel." Thaddeus studied the schematics, his mind already forming a plan. "We'd need to know exactly where they're holding Selene once we're inside." "That's where the access credentials come in," Devereaux explained. "They'll allow you to access the internal security network briefly before they detect the intrusion." It was risky, borderline suicidal. But as Thaddeus looked at the triplets, these extraordinary children who had suffered so much, he knew they had no choice. Selene had sacrificed everything to protect them. Now it was his turn to do the same. "We'll need equipment," he said. "Communication devices, tools for the access point, weapons." "I have some resources," Devereaux offered. "Not much, but enough to give you a fighting chance." As they began planning the rescue operation, Thaddeus felt a small hand slip into his. Looking down, he found Nova standing beside him, her amber eyes, Elara's eyes, gazing up at him with a mixture of fear and determination. "We're going to find her, aren't we?" she asked softly. Thaddeus squeezed her hand gently. "Yes, we're going to bring your mother home." And in that moment, surrounded by unlikely allies in a hidden cabin, plotting against a powerful enemy, Thaddeus Blackwood made a silent vow. He would reunite this fractured family. He would protect these children who, against all odds and scientific ethics, were his own. And he would make Helios pay for what they had done. The countdown had begun. In less than 48 hours, the children would need their next dose of the inhibitor. And somewhere in a heavily guarded facility, Selene Nazari, the woman he had loved as Elara Chen, was waiting for rescue. Time was running out. Dawn broke over the forested mountains, pale light filtering through the cabin windows. Thaddeus stood over a makeshift laboratory setup on Devereaux's kitchen table, watching as the former Helios scientist carefully measured clear liquid into vials. The triplets sat nearby, unusually quiet as they observed the creation of the substance that would shield their unique genetic markers from detection. The solution needs 6 more hours to stabilize, Devereaux explained, sealing the final vial. Then it will be ready for administration. Thaddeus nodded, checking his watch. That gives us time to finalize the infiltration plan. Over the past 12 hours, they had transformed Devereaux's cabin into an operations center. Razor had converted her spare bedroom into a communications hub, using equipment she had salvaged from her Helios days. Satellite imagery of the port. Jefferson facility covered one wall alongside thermal scans showing guard rotations and security patterns. The maintenance access shows minimal activity, Reza reported, pointing to a service road that curved behind the main buildings. 1 patrol every 40 minutes. If we time it correctly, we can enter undetected. And once inside? Thaddeus asked. Devereaux pulled up the facility schematics on her laptop. Based on security protocols, high-value subjects would be held here. She indicated a section in the northeast corner. It's their most secure containment area, with limited access points. How many guards? Orion asked, studying the blueprints with unsettling intensity for a child his age. Typically 4 on rotation, Devereaux replied. Plus electronic security, keypads, retinal scanners, motion sensors. Can your credentials bypass those? Thaddeus asked. Devereaux hesitated. Some, not all, and using them will trigger alerts in their system. Once that happens, we'll have 20 minutes at most before the facility locks down completely. It wasn't enough time. The containment area was too far from the access point, with too many security layers between. They needed another approach. What about a distraction? Lyra suggested, her analytical mind already mapping scenarios. Something to draw security away from the containment area. Like what? Reza asked. A fire alarm? A chemical spill? She shrugged. Something that would trigger evacuation protocols. Devereaux considered this. Possible. Emergency protocols would redirect security to containment points, potentially leaving gaps in coverage. But we'd need someone to trigger it, Thaddeus pointed out. Someone who could move freely within the facility without raising suspicion. A heavy silence fell over the room as the implication became clear. Someone would need to enter the facility openly, placing themselves at extreme risk. I'll do it, Devereaux said finally. My credentials might still grant me access through the main entrance. I could claim I've reconsidered my resignation, that I want to negotiate my return. They'd never believe that, Reza argued. You've been on their most wanted list for years. They would if I brought them something valuable enough, Devereaux countered, her gaze shifting to the triplets. Or someone. Thaddeus immediately stepped between Devereaux and the children. Absolutely not. We're not using them as bait. Not all of them, Devereaux clarified quickly, and not for real. A convincing illusion, enough to get me through the front door while you access the service entrance. Nova stood, her small face set with determination. I'll go. No, Thaddeus and her siblings said simultaneously. It makes tactical sense, Nova insisted. I'm the smallest, the least physically imposing. They'd underestimate me, and I could wear a tracker, so you'd know exactly where I am at all times. It's too dangerous, Thaddeus said firmly. Everything about this is dangerous, Nova countered. Mom risked everything for us. I can do this for her. The conviction in her voice, so adult, so resolute, made Thaddeus's chest ache. These children had never been allowed a normal childhood, had been forced to think in terms of tactical advantages and acceptable risks. It was wrong, profoundly wrong, and yet in their current circumstances it might be necessary. "We need a better plan," he insisted, "one that doesn't put any of you directly in harm's way." They spent the next hour debating alternatives, each option seemingly worse than the last. The facility's security was too comprehensive, the risks too high, and all the while, the clock was ticking. Somewhere inside that compound, Celine was being held against her will, possibly undergoing the very experiments she had fought to protect her children from. Finally, Lyra spoke up again. "What about creating a virtual presence?" Everyone turned to her. "Explain," Reza prompted. Dr. Devereaux could approach the facility claiming she wants to negotiate, but instead of bringing one of us physically, she could offer digital evidence of our location. A video feed, seemingly live but actually pre-recorded, showing one of us in a secure location. "A digital hostage," Orion elaborated. "She tells them she'll reveal our location only after she's granted access to speak with Mom." Devereaux nodded slowly. "It might work. Helios values information almost as much as physical assets. If they believed I could lead them to all three subjects, they might grant me limited access. And while they're focused on Devereaux and the video feed, we enter through the service tunnel," Thaddeus concluded. It was still risky, but it kept the children physically removed from danger. They could record the video here at the cabin, giving Helios just enough to believe the offer was genuine without revealing their actual location. "There's one more component we need to address," Reza said. "Extraction. Once we locate Selene, how do we get everyone out safely?" This had been the most challenging aspect of their planning. The facility's perimeter was heavily monitored, with multiple checkpoints between the containment area and any potential exit. "We create chaos," Thaddeus suggested. "Not just a distraction, complete system failure. If we could shut down their power grid, security systems would default to emergency protocols. The backup generators would kick in within seconds," Devereaux countered. "Not if they're disabled too," Orion said. "During the override, there's a 3-second window when both primary and backup systems are vulnerable. If you hit them with an electromagnetic pulse during that window, everything goes dark." The adults stared at him. "How do you know that?" Thaddeus asked. Orion shrugged. "Mom made us study electrical engineering, said it might save our lives someday." Celine had prepared her children for every contingency, including this one. Thaddeus felt a renewed surge of admiration for the woman who had sacrificed everything to protect these extraordinary children. "Can we generate an EMP strong enough to affect the entire facility?" he asked Reza. "With the right components, yes, but the timing would have to be perfect. And we'd need to shield our own communication devices to avoid disabling them too." "I can help with that," Devereaux said. "I have equipment here that can be modified." They broke into teams, each focusing on a specific aspect of the mission. Reza and Devereaux worked on the EMP device, converting parts from her laboratory, equipment and security systems. Thaddeus helped the triplets record a convincing video that would appear to be a live feed, careful to remove any identifiable elements of the cabin from the background. As evening approached, Devereaux administered the inhibitor injections to the triplets. Each child received the dose without complaint, accustomed to the procedure after years of monthly treatments. "How long will this batch last?" Thaddeus asked as she finished. 30 days, same as before," Devereaux replied. "I've prepared additional vials for you to take. After that, you'll need to synthesize more using the formula I've provided." The implication was clear. She didn't expect to return from this mission. By approaching Helios directly, Devereaux was effectively sacrificing herself to give them a chance at rescuing Celine. "We'll find another way," Thaddeus said quietly. Devereaux shook her head. "This is the only viable option, and it's fitting that I should be the one to take the greatest risk, a small atonement for my role in creating this situation." As night fell, they made final preparations. Devereaux packed a tablet with the pre-recorded video, carefully encrypted, to appear as a live feed. Reza finished assembling the EMP device, a compact unit that could be concealed in a maintenance cart. Thaddeus checked and rechecked the communications equipment, ensuring they would remain operational when the EMP triggered. The triplets prepared in their own way, changing into dark clothing suitable for the operation, checking the specialized tracking devices Reza had created for each of them. Despite Thaddeus's objections, they had insisted on participating in the rescue, not from inside the facility, but as nearby support, monitoring communications, tracking movements, ready to implement contingency plans if necessary. "You should try to rest," Thaddeus told them as midnight approached. "Tomorrow will require all our strength." Instead of arguing, the triplets surprised him by organizing themselves in the cabin's small living room, arranging blankets and pillows in a neat row. They lay down together, their breathing falling into synchronization as if they shared a single set of lungs. Within minutes, they appeared to be sleeping. Thaddeus watched them, struck again by their unique bond. Whatever Helios had done in creating them, they had achieved something remarkable. Children whose connection transcended normal sibling relationships, who functioned as both individuals and parts of a greater whole. "They're extraordinary," Devereaux said softly, joining him at the doorway, "far beyond what we initially projected." "They're children," Thaddeus corrected. "Extraordinary, yes, but first and foremost, children who deserve a chance at a normal life." Devereaux nodded, her scientific detachment momentarily replaced by genuine emotion. Celine understood that from the beginning. It's why she risked everything to save them. "And now we do the same for her," Thaddeus replied. Dawn broke foggy and grey, ideal conditions for their approach to the facility. They left the cabin at first light, traveling in Devereaux's SUV to maintain the appearance of her acting alone. A half-mile from the compound, they separated. Devereaux continued toward the main entrance, while Thaddeus, Reza, and the triplets circled through the forest to a position overlooking the service road. "Comms check," Thaddeus said quietly into his earpiece. "Clear," came Reza's response. "Clear!" the triplets answered in unison, their voices eerily synchronized even through electronic transmission. From their vantage point, they watched as Devereaux's vehicle approached the main gate. She stopped at the security checkpoint, speaking with guards who immediately raised weapons upon recognizing her. After a tense moment, a phone call was made. Then, surprisingly, the gates opened and Devereaux was escorted inside, her vehicle left behind. "They took the bait," Reza observed. "Now we wait for her signal." The plan called for Devereaux to initiate contact with facility leadership, offering her supposed information about the triplets. Once inside, she would request to see Celine, claiming she needed to verify her condition before revealing the children's location. Meanwhile, she would seek an opportunity to disable the monitoring systems for the service entrance, creating a window for their infiltration. 20 minutes passed in tense silence. Then Devereaux's voice came through their earpieces. "I'm in the main laboratory section. They're taking me to see Celine in 5 minutes. Security camera 7 in the service corridor will go dark in exactly 2 minutes. That's your window." Thaddeus checked his watch, then nodded to Reza. "Let's move." They descended quickly through the trees, the triplets following with surprising agility, despite Thaddeus's instructions to remain at the observation point. He didn't have time to argue. Their window was closing rapidly. The service road was empty as they approached, just as their surveillance had indicated. A maintenance door built into the perimeter fence stood slightly ajar. Devereaux's work through the security system. 30 seconds, Reza warned, checking the timer on his phone. They slipped through the door and immediately pressed themselves against the wall of a utility shed. A security camera mounted on a nearby pole swiveled in their direction, then abruptly powered down, their signal to move. Thaddeus led the way to a ventilation access point, quickly removing the cover with tools Devereaux had provided. One by one, they climbed inside, Reza replacing the cover behind them. The ventilation shaft was cramped but navigable, particularly for the triplets, who moved through it with practiced ease. They followed a path memorized from the facility schematics, counting junctions and measuring distances in hushed whispers. After 10 minutes of careful progress, they reached a grate. Overlooking an empty maintenance corridor, Thaddeus peered through, confirming it matched their expected location, then carefully removed the grate and dropped down. "We're in position," he whispered into his communicator. "Status update?" "I've seen her." Devereaux's voice was barely audible, likely speaking while pretending to examine something. "Northeast quadrant security level 3. They've got her sedated but alive. 2 guards at her door." Relief washed over Thaddeus. Celine was alive. Now they just needed to reach her before Helios realized Devereaux's offer was a ruse. "Beginning. Phase 2, he confirmed. Reza removed the EMP device from his pack, powering it up with practiced movements. "We need to place this near the primary power junction. According to the schematics, it should be 2 corridors east of our position." They moved cautiously through the maintenance areas, the triplets following, despite Thaddeus's continued disapproval. He had to admit their presence was an asset. They moved silently, their enhanced senses alert to approaching danger before the adults could detect it. Twice, Nova signaled them to stop and hide moments before security personnel appeared. Each time, they avoided detection by seconds. They reached the power junction, a room filled with electrical panels and monitoring equipment. Reza worked quickly, placing the EMP device in a position where its effect would cascade through the entire system. "Set for remote detonation," he confirmed, connecting it to a trigger on his phone. "We'll activate it once we're in position outside Celine's room." As they left the junction room, Devereaux's voice came through again, tension evident. "They're getting suspicious. I don't think the video is convincing them anymore. You need to hurry." "On our way," Thaddeus replied. Estimated time to position, 4 minutes. But as they turned a corner, they encountered an unexpected obstacle, a security checkpoint that hadn't appeared on the schematics. 2 guards stood at a desk, checking credentials for the handful of personnel passing through. "We can't get past that," Reza whispered, pulling back around the corner. Thaddeus assessed their options. Going back would cost precious time they didn't have. Trying to neutralize the guards would certainly trigger alarms. "I have an idea," Lyra said suddenly. Before anyone could stop her, she stepped out from their hiding place and walked directly toward the checkpoint. Thaddeus reached for her, but it was too late. The guards immediately spotted her, their hands moving to their weapons. "Hello," Lyra said in a bright, childish voice completely unlike her usual serious tone. "I'm supposed to be in the tour group. The school field trip? I got separated, and I'm really lost." The guards exchanged confused glances. "There's no tour group scheduled today," one of them said, approaching her cautiously. "How did you get in here?" "Through the big doors at the front," Lyra said, her performance flawless. "With Ms. Peterson's class from Westridge Elementary. We're learning about science stuff." As the guards focused on Lyra, Orion and Nova slipped from hiding and positioned themselves on either side of the checkpoint, unseen by the distracted security. "Personnel. What's your name?" the second guard asked, reaching for his radio. Before he could call for assistance, Nova and Orion acted in perfect synchronization. Nova flipped a switch on a nearby electrical panel, plunging the corridor into momentary darkness. In the same instant, Orion triggered a small device that emitted a high-frequency sound, disorienting the guards. Thaddeus and Razor moved then, quickly subduing the confused security personnel before they could recover. Within seconds, the guards were unconscious and secured with zip ties. That was incredibly dangerous, Thaddeus hissed, torn between anger at the triplets' reckless action and admiration for their effectiveness. But successful, Lyra pointed out calmly. And now we have these. She held up the guards' access cards and a security radio. They dragged the unconscious guards into a storage closet, then proceeded through the checkpoint, moving steadily toward the medical section where Selena was being held. "We're approaching security level 3, Thaddeus reported to Devereaux. "Status?" Her response came in a strained whisper. "They know. They've figured out the video is a loop. They're detaining me now." A moment later, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. "We're blown," Razor said grimly. "Time for Plan B." Triggering EMP in 30 seconds, Thaddeus decided. "Everyone prepare for total darkness." He turned to the triplets. "Stay close to me. No matter what happens, don't get separated." Razor initiated the countdown on his phone. As the seconds ticked away, they positioned themselves in a service alcove near the entrance to security level 3. Through a reinforced glass door, they could see staff rushing to secure sensitive areas, responding to the facility-wide alert. 3, 2, 1. Razor pressed the trigger. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the lights flickered, electronic systems whined as power surged, and suddenly everything went dark. The emergency lighting tried to activate, but failed. As the secondary systems crashed, absolute darkness enveloped them. The triplets moved closer to Thaddeus, their breathing steady despite the chaos. "Night vision," Thaddeus instructed, distributing the specialized glasses Devereaux had provided. Once activated, they revealed the corridor in eerie green illumination. The security doors had defaulted to emergency manual operation. Razor approached the entrance to level 3, using the access card they'd acquired to trigger the mechanical release. Inside, confusion reigned. Medical staff stumbled in the darkness, calling out for instructions. Security personnel attempted to establish order, their flashlights providing the only illumination as they secured critical areas. Using the stolen security radio, they listened as commands were issued across the facility. Secure all subjects, prevent breaches, maintain containment. "Ooh, northeast quadrant," Thaddeus reminded them, leading the way through the darkened corridors. They encountered several staff members, but in the confusion of the blackout, their presence didn't immediately register as suspicious. They moved purposefully, as if they belonged, until they reached a heavily secured door marked "Restricted Access." "This is it," Razor confirmed, examining the lock mechanism. Without power, the electronic security was disabled, but a manual deadbolt remained. Orion stepped forward, producing a small set of lock-picking tools from his pocket. "Mom taught us," he explained at Thaddeus's surprised expression. Within moments, the lock clicked open. Inside, a dimly lit room held a single hospital bed. And there, pale but unmistakable, was Celine Nazari, formerly Elara Chen. Her copper hair was longer than Thaddeus remembered, her face thinner, but it was undeniably her. She appeared to be unconscious, an IV drip connected to her arm, monitoring equipment dark after the EMP blast. The triplets rushed to her side, their usual composure breaking as they touched her face, her hands, reassuring themselves that she was real. "Mum," Nova whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Mum, please wake up." Thaddeus approached slowly, his heart hammering. 5 years of grief, of believing she was dead, dissolved in an instant. She was alive, changed certainly. The years had marked her, but alive. Celine's eyelids fluttered. Slowly, as if swimming up from a great depth, she opened her eyes. For a moment, she seemed disoriented, her gaze unfocused. Then she saw the triplets. "My stars," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You came." "Of course we came," Lyra said fiercely. "You're our mother." Celine struggled to sit up, Orion and Nova helping to support her. Then her gaze moved beyond the children, landing on Thaddeus. Her eyes widened, a complex mixture of emotions crossing her face: shock, joy, fear, and something deeper. "Thaddeus," she breathed. "How?" "The children found me," he said simply. "They brought your photograph, told me you were in danger." Tears filled her eyes. "I never wanted to involve you. It wasn't fair." "We can discuss that later," Reza interrupted from the doorway. "Right now we need to move. Security will be reorganizing despite the EMP. Thaddeus nodded, quickly disconnecting Selena from the monitoring equipment and IV. "Can you walk?" She attempted to stand but swayed dangerously. "They've been keeping me sedated, some kind of neural inhibitor." He lifted her into his arms without hesitation, her weight almost nothing against his strength. "We're getting you out of here. All of us." With Reza leading and the triplets forming a protective circle around Thaddeus and Selene, they moved, back through the darkened corridors. The confusion from the EMP was beginning to subside as security implemented manual protocols. Twice they had to duck into empty rooms to avoid patrols. "Devereaux?" Selene asked weakly as they navigated the complex. "Compromised," Thaddeus replied grimly. "She created the diversion that got us in." Selene closed her eyes briefly. "She helped me escape with the children years ago, risked everything. And did so again today," Reza added. They reached the security checkpoint, where they had disabled the guards, finding it now manned by additional personnel with flashlights and weapons. The exit route was blocked. "Alternate path," Reza suggested, consulting the mental map he had memorized. "Through the research wing, then the loading docks." They changed direction, moving deeper into the facility before turning toward the west exit. Progress was slower now, with Celine's condition and the increased security presence. As they approached the research wing, a commotion ahead made them pause, shouting followed by the distinctive sound of gunfire. "Someone else is fighting," Reza observed, peering cautiously around a corner. What they saw was unexpected, a tactical team engaged in combat with Helios security, but these weren't government forces or police. They moved with military precision, their unmarked black tactical gear suggesting a private operation. "Another organization," Selene whispered, understanding immediately. "A competitor. They've been trying to acquire Helios research for years. The EMP must have triggered their assault." The firefight provided a distraction, but also a new danger. They couldn't risk being caught in the crossfire, nor could they allow either faction to capture them. "Service tunnels," Thaddeus decided. 2 levels down. They'll be focused on securing valuable research, not maintenance areas. They located a stairwell and descended carefully, Thaddeus still carrying Selene. The lower levels were minimally staffed during the emergency, most personnel having evacuated or moved to secure critical areas. The service tunnels were utilitarian, concrete passages used for moving equipment and supplies. Following the emergency exit signs, they navigated toward the loading docks on the west side of the facility. "We're almost out," Thaddeus encouraged, feeling Selena's strength returning as the sedatives wore off. She was now able to walk with support, leaning heavily on him. They emerged onto the loading dock to find it in chaos, employees fleeing, the building's security attempting to maintain order, and in the distance, the sound of approaching sirens. The competing tactical team had triggered a full-scale emergency response. The perimeter fence, Razor pointed to where the tactical assault had breached the facility's outer defenses. If we move now, we can slip through during the confusion. They descended from the loading dock and made their way along the side of the building, keeping to shadows. The triplets moved with perfect coordination, their enhanced senses alert to any threat. Celine watched them with a mixture of pride and sadness, her children performing the skills she had taught them in hopes they would never need to use them. As they approached the breach in the fence, a voice called out behind them, "Stop right there!" They turned to find a Helios security officer, weapon raised. Before anyone could react, a shot rang out, but not from the guard's weapon. He crumpled to the ground as a figure emerged from the shadows. Devereaux, blood staining her sleeve, a stolen security weapon in her hand. "Go!" she ordered, her voice strained. "There's a vehicle on the other side of the fence, keys under the front seat." "Moira," Celine said, stepping forward, "come with us." Devereaux shook her head. "I'll hold them off, give you time." "No, more sacrifices," Thaddeus insisted. "You've done enough." But Devereaux's expression was resolute. "This is my choice, my redemption. Now go, save these children, give them the life we tried to deny them." Before they could argue further, shouting erupted from the main building. More security was coming. "Thank you," Celine said, her voice breaking. Devereaux nodded once, then turned to face the approaching guards. They heard her call out, claiming to have captured the escaping subjects, buying them precious seconds to slip through the fence and into the forest beyond. Just as Devereaux had promised, a vehicle waited, an unmarked black SUV with tinted windows. Thaddeus found the keys, and within moments they were driving away from the compound, the sounds of chaos fading behind them. In the back seat, Celine held her children close, tears streaming down her face as she whispered reassurances and endearments. Thaddeus caught her eye in the rearview mirror, a lifetime of questions in his gaze. She held his look, a silent promise to explain everything when they were safe. They drove for hours, switching vehicles twice using arrangements Razor had made in advance. By nightfall, they had reached a safe house on the coast, a modest cottage overlooking the ocean, remote enough to provide temporary security. As the triplets finally succumbed to exhaustion, sleeping peacefully in a bedroom, Celine and Thaddeus stood on the porch, watching waves crash against the shoreline in the moonlight. "I thought you were dead," Thaddeus said softly. "For 5 years. I mourned you." "I know," Celine replied, her voice tight with emotion. "Believing I was dead was the only way to keep you safe. Helios would have targeted anyone connected to me." "But the children," he began. "I didn't know about them when I left," she explained. "Project Constellation was compartmentalized. I was working on genetic modification research, but I didn't know they had used my DNA, or yours, until after I discovered their true purpose. By then, the children were already in the acceleration chambers. They were developing at 3 times the normal rate." She paused, gathering herself. "I couldn't leave them there. They would have been raised as weapons, stripped of humanity, used for whatever Helios wanted. So I destroyed the lab, took the children, and disappeared." "Why not come to me?" Thaddeus asked, the pain of 5 years evident in his voice. "And drag you into a life of running, constant danger, raising children who weren't conceived naturally but created in a lab?" She shook her head. "I couldn't do that to you. It wasn't fair." "That wasn't your decision to make," he said gently. "I would have chosen a life on the run with you over these years without you." Celine looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. "And now, these children, they're extraordinary, but they're not normal. They'll never be normal. Helios will never stop looking for them. Can you accept that life?" Thaddeus took her hand, feeling the familiar warmth he had thought lost forever. They're part of you, and now I know they're part of me too. However they came to be, they're our children. And yes, I choose that life. Protecting them, giving them as much normalcy as possible, facing whatever comes together. Tears spilled down Celine's cheeks. "I've missed you so much," she whispered. "Every day, I wondered if I made the right choice." "We have a second chance now," Thaddeus said. "All of us." Inside the cottage, the triplets weren't as deeply asleep as their parents believed. Through their unique connection, they shared the same thought: a family, complete at last. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever unique abilities continued to develop, whatever remnants of Helios might still pursue them, they would face it together. And for the first time in their extraordinary lives, they felt not just safe, but truly home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.